We are in part 2 of a series on our vision statement here at Banbury Community Church. Last week we looked at love God. Today we're going to be looking at reach people. And then in 2 weeks' time we're going to be looking at make disciples. We've got a gap next week in this 3-week series because we have some guests coming. Paul and Karen Cooper are coming from Compass Church in Wellingborough. They are people that got saved in the same church that I got saved in way back when, and they've grown a church in Wellingborough just amazingly, and it would be great to hear from them. They're actually going to stay the afternoon and then be with us at the induction ceremony as well. So really looking forward to them being with us. So yes, we find ourselves in the middle part of a 3-part series on our mission statement as a church: love God, reach people, make disciples. And today is all about reach people. And I want to open by sharing a story with you today of something that happened this week. I went and visited a minister friend of mine, a minister called David. And David ministers in a church in Birmingham. And he's also in charge of, he's in charge of 12 churches in total. So he's both like a bishop and a pastor at the same time. And any person that takes on that role is under quite a bit of challenge because, you know, it's busy enough leading a church, but it's very, very busy kind of overseeing a whole load more churches. So that's quite an ask for him. So we met up for coffee, and I wanted to meet him because I meet pastors a lot to talk to them about Isaiah 61 movement, which we will come on to in just a bit. But he wanted to talk to me about that, and I wanted to meet with him to talk to him about how Isaiah 61 movement works. And he shared a problem that he has with me. So his set of churches was founded out of something called the Windrush sort of sequence in history. So Windrush was a large ship that came over from the West Indies in 1948 in response to an invitation from the British government at the time for people in some of our colonial lands, and even saying the word colonial is a little awkward these days, isn't it? But we were in charge of some of the countries out there, administratively and government-wise, and we invited some people to come and join us in our nation here in the UK. And Windrush was a boat on which lots and lots of West Indians travelled to the UK, and that was the beginning of a lot of travel from those nations to Britain, and a lot of those people settled here in Britain. Now, what happened was that people who went to church over there needed to find a church to go to over here. And I just want you to pause a minute and imagine something. Imagine that tomorrow all the jobs dried up in Banbury and in Oxfordshire and in the UK, and there was a mass exodus of people from this nation to other nations that had better jobs. And half of us decided to go to Lithuania, and half of us decided to go to Chile, okay? Just because that's the way the cookie crumbled and that's the way the economics played out. A crazy scenario, I get it, but imagine that for a minute, okay? What you would do when you got to Chile, or when you got to Lithuania, is you'd find some other English-speaking people who'd done the same thing as you, and do you know what you'd do? You'd go to church with them, wouldn't you? Well, I think you would. And alongside learning Spanish for Chile and Lithuanian, whatever they speak in Lithuania, I think it's Lithuanian, you'd go on that journey of integration. But at the beginning, you would go to church with your expat friends in whatever nation that you found yourself in because of the economic opportunity. So I just want you to imagine that that's how things play out. You and I would do exactly the same if we were in that situation. So a whole bunch of these people come over from the West Indies, and it forms a pipeline of people who are looking for churches. Now, my friend David is in charge of these 12 churches whose primary outreach strategy was to kind of group all of these people as they've come in and give them a church. And so there are 12 churches around the UK to this day who are primarily and mainly from the heritage of the Windrush generation. And so that was a whole bunch of people that travelled across up until probably the mid-80s, maybe even later than that. And what these people would do is they'd arrive in church, and they'd arrive in the neighbourhood, and they'd say, hey, is there a church that I can go to that I feel comfortable in? And their local Caribbean community would say, well, yeah, just down the road, why don't you go and see them? And they would walk in the door, and they'd feel comfortable straight away. It would be like being at home. Now, my friend David explained all this to me, but then he said, but we've got a problem. We have a problem now because that supply line or that pipeline of people is dwindling away. That model of engaging people to come to church from that source of nationalities is slowly petering out. There are not so many people wanting to do that anymore People come across, they integrate in a different way. There's just not the same volume of people. And also people are making new choices about church. And he said, my churches are beginning to die. I need a way to reach people. I need a way of rebuilding my church that doesn't rely on what was a fixed pipeline of interested people, but now isn't. In fact, I need a way of reaching people where most of the people I'm reaching haven't already been saved in a church in the Caribbean and now just want to have something similar here. They want to come to church, and I want to be able to provide church for whoever is in my neighborhood. Different audience altogether, isn't it? Different scenario, different setup. Another thing that's been happening in his churches is that the next generations down from the people who arrived with Windrush have been assimilating for a while. In fact, they've been assimilating ever since. And new generations that come along, they assimilate into the culture super fast. And can I say, probably a little faster than some of us adults would like to admit for ourselves. We don't assimilate as fast as our youngsters do. They are right on it with culture. It happens with us. Never mind foreign cultures. It happens here and now. We have assimilation going on in the younger generation to a level that leaves us feeling a little confused and all at sea. So if I said some words to you, skibbity, put your hand up here if you know what skibbity means. Okay, 2.5 people. Okay, delulu. You know what delulu means? Okay, a little bit more. There's some knowing smiles from younger generation. Okay, I was banned from using this word by a 21-year-old altogether in any sermon, but I'm going to say it because I was banned. Riz. Anyone here know what Riz means? Yeah, okay, 1 or 2 people know what Riz means. How about mouse jiggler? Do you know what a mouse jiggler is? I mean, it's fairly obvious what it is. It's somebody who manages to move a mouse so that you can bypass the entry to a website, because a mouse apparently moving is proof that you're human, okay? These are terms that our youngsters are completely comfortable with. I'm getting an approving smile from my son Simon, because it wasn't him who banned me from using the word Riz, by the way, it was someone else. But I've talked about this a lot in my family, and they've said, just do not use these words, but I've done it, yay! Great. Our culture moves on like a river. It moves on. It really does. And in meeting culture well at one time, or for a particular purpose, we cannot assume that churches can continue to use the same methods that they used in the past, or in whatever used to work in the past, again in the future, in exactly the same way. We have to morph the way in which we bring our messaging of the timeless news of Jesus into the world where it's at right now. And if we don't connect with the world where it's at right now, we will become redundant. Now, hear me clearly on this. I am not saying for one split second that the gospel is redundant. No, not at all. In fact, it is timeless, it's always relevant, it's always necessary, and it's absolutely the solution to humanity's needs. We all need a saviour. We all need to meet Jesus. We all need him to get into heaven. We are souls in human bodies in a temporary human life with the aim from God that we would make it into heaven with him as our Heavenly Father. That need and that setup is identical to what it was thousands of years ago, and it is to today. But if I turned up in a toga today and tried to do oratory for you, as though I was in Athens, like Paul did in Greece, you'd probably snigger a little bit. Yeah, you would. You would just think, well, Nick, you're not really kind of in touch with where we're at. And we'll find you a bit of a joke or a bit irrelevant. And so the church has to do some hard work in constantly repointing the gospel at wherever the culture finds itself. Because if it doesn't do that, it becomes irrelevant. And the culture just goes, well, you're weird. We don't want anything to do with you. You're disappearing in some kind of weird obscurity. How cultures receive stuff keeps on changing, but the message that we have doesn't. But that means we have to repoint the focus and keep working at that. Now, I want to show you an illustration of this from, it's GCSE geography, except back in my day, it was O-level geography. See, even that's been changed on me. I'm completely all at sea about that. There's a slide that should come up, hopefully. Could you do the slides there? Just click this, right, okay. Let's see if this works. So we'll turn this on. There we go. We have a pointer. We do, great. Do we have a slide? Hopefully so. Let's go that way. We need to solve this, don't we? It just doesn't really work very well. There we go. Could you do page down on the display map? Is that all right? Let's have a quick look. Yep. Click down, hopefully. Okay, I'll give you a verbal description instead. Okay, so this comes from my geography GCSE or O-level days. And what happens with rivers is that over time, and as they get nearer to the sea, and particularly if the land is flat, oh, fantastic. A little round of applause for you, Matt. Well done. Thank you very much. Cheers, appreciate that. What happens with rivers as they get nearer to the sea is that they get broader, lazier, and particularly as the land gets flatter and into a delta area near the sea, the river starts to do this. It starts to wind, okay? And sometimes the winding of the river is so much that what it does is, as it goes around like this, the S shapes in the curve of the river get so extreme that they almost come back on themselves. And the river works out, just through its sheer energy and its erosive power, that it's actually just quicker to break the bank down. And what it does is it leaves a segment of the river off to the side. Now this is from Hokkaido in Japan, and you can see where the river ran before. It used to run this way, and then it went round in a big loop like this, and then it carried on down there. And there's a river on the right, and the modern course of the river is to the right, and it's gone sweeping through. But it used to do that. But when it broke through the meeting of the S shape, it cut something off. And that piece of water has been left stranded. And that's, in geography, that's called an oxbow lake. I don't know the origin of the word oxbow, but that's what it's called. It's a segment of water that has been cut off, and it's becoming stagnant. Now, David's problem with his churches is that pretty much all of his churches have become, spiritually, an oxbow lake, because they're reaching some people in ways that have now moved on. Those people aren't coming through the pipeline of his church anymore, and they've decided to do something else. And so he's left with some oxbow churches. I would not want for Banbury Community Church to become an oxbow lake church. I don't want that. I don't want us all to grow old together. I don't want that. I want us to reach out. I want us to reach people. If we do not reach people, we will become redundant. It's as simple as that. If we don't have a means of connecting with ordinary people in the day-to-day run of our lives in a way that's meaningful and workable, what will eventually happen is we will become an oxbow lake. We really will. And maybe you're feeling a little uncomfortable this morning, and I'm feeling uncomfortable. We have some work to do to connect with people and find new ways of connecting with the 60-odd thousand people in this town so that they would have the chance to get to know Jesus, to become his follower. Now, I'm sure all of us have been to a church or to a meeting or in our journey of faith where we've walked into that meeting, we've thought, oh man, I'm feeling really uncomfortable here. I haven't been made to feel welcome. I don't know I want to come again. We feel it on the inside. And can I say, this isn't unique to churches. This is something that happens in lots and lots of groups of people. I remember my wife Chloe's dad, her dad went along to a bridge club in his local village or near his local village, and they were so frosty and weird with him that he thought, well, you're not very welcoming, I'm not going to go back. And then, unsurprisingly, that bridge club folded after a while because they were just too insular and they didn't reach out, they didn't connect, they didn't reach people. So it happens in all walks of life. You know, little cliques form or little groups and people get comfortable and then suddenly they've lost their raison d'etre, their cause of why they want to exist. So in my conversation with David this week, we've had a great conversation about how can we connect better with those we find around us now. The people that are there now, not the Windrush community that was a pipeline but now isn't. What can we do to connect now? So I want to just talk about some theology that lies behind some of this. Ludi read for us from Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 3. I'm just going to read a little bit of that again, just the beginning section. It says, "The Spirit of the Lord God is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. It's an absolutely landmark statement from Isaiah. It's one of the most famous prophetic phrases he uses, up there with Isaiah 53 and up there with the encounter in Isaiah 6 that we saw last week. And what he's saying basically is that there's a mandate upon whoever the me is in this story. We're not sure quite who that is, but it's certainly prophetically pointing forward to Jesus. A mandate to bring good news to the poor. Now, the poor isn't necessarily the financially poor. Let's just bring a clarity to that. It's the spiritually poor. It's those who don't have a spiritual solution and are therefore they're not in the optimal place that God would want them to be. And we know that that's the case because Jesus preaches the Beatitudes by opening, in Matthew chapter 5, he opens, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And what he's saying there is, if you recognize the lack in your own soul, don't be too downcast because you're in the prime position to receive from Jesus. So if you're someone that's been through a setback or a difficulty or a hardship, or you really feel the lack on the inside of how your life is playing out, in a strange kind of way, that sets you up to be highly receptive to God. Because God is the person that can come along and fix that with a relationship with his son. So don't be too down on yourself if things aren't great, because what Jesus is saying in the Beatitudes is, well, hey, you are in absolutely prime position to receive from me. And so there's a link there with the Beatitudes back to this Isaiah verse, Isaiah 61 verse 3. Now, Jesus then picks up this prophetic verse from Isaiah 61 verse 1. He then picks it up and he speaks about it in his opening sermon in Luke chapter 4. So he goes to the synagogue, built by a Gentile. If you research carefully, you will find it was built by that Roman centurion who features in another part of the Gospels. I was fascinated to find that synagogue's built by a Gentile. It's another story for another day. But he goes to the sermon, and he gets the scroll of Isaiah out, and he rolls open to Isaiah 61, and he reads out Isaiah 61, 1 to 3, whatever. And then he stands there, and he looks at them all, and he says, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." Can you imagine what a grand and powerful statement that is? You know, if I came in here and I said something to you which was, highly scriptural and highly prophetic, and I stood here and went, "Hey, I am the solution to this," you'd be like, "No, you're not. You're just Pastor Nick. Get back in your more humble place. You have not done that right." You would be questioning that. And yet Jesus preaches it, and they kind of somehow have to take it because he is the Son of God. And he is the fulfillment of it. There's nothing like truth being on your side to help you out make a case. So he preaches this, but as the message continues, it gets a little more scary for Jesus because he starts calling out the Jews in the audience for not being that receptive to him, not being very open to what he has to say. He points to Gentiles as being more receptive to God than the Jews themselves, and it annoys them. They get irritated by it. He points out the fact that the widow of Zarephath was more receptive to God, that Naaman the Syrian went and actually did what he was told with regards to the healing, and he got his healing. And the audience do not warm up to this at all, and they get really annoyed about it. In fact, they get so annoyed that they try and throw him off a cliff. And this is Luke 4. I mean, it was quite early in his ministry. When was the last time you went to a sermon or a church meeting where you got so annoyed with a minister that you wanted to throw him off a cliff? I hope that's not today. Can I just say that? I'd like to join the picnic, if that's all right. But it was pretty radical. And so Jesus kind of makes his audience a little angry. He's telling them truthful things, but he's wrestling to connect with them, and they're not really hearing him. Now, he's telling the truth, and he has the right to tell the truth, but there's a disconnect going on. Now, the reason I've included the John verses, those brief John verses, is that they are a contrast to a proclamation of truth by Jesus himself that doesn't land very well, and relational evangelism. Relational evangelism is you and I telling our friends, our families, our work colleagues, the people we meet at the church, the school gate, the people we might bump into while out shopping, whatever it might be, that we build relationship with them enough to be able to tell them some important and significant truths. So in John 1, 40 to 41, read for us there by Ludi, Andrew finds Simon Peter. In John 1:45, Philip finds Nathanael. John 4:28, this woman goes and tells her town that she's met with the Messiah. Or could this be the Messiah? This is based off of relationship with these people, where in the relationship there is a communication going on that says, hey, I think you need to know about this. This is important. This is people reaching people with the news of Jesus, and they do it relationally. All of them made introductions to their friends, their family, through personal relationship. Now, relational outreach has, as the name sounds, enough of a relationship in place to have a bridge between you and the other person that can take the future weight of discipleship. Let me say that again. Relational evangelism has enough of a relationship in place between you and the other person that it can take and withstand a future discipleship journey. Now, I think there is a place for street mission. I think there's a place for reaching out to people randomly in the street. I think there's a place for handing out tracts. I think there's a place for that kind of thing. But what I've noticed over the years as a minister is that I don't often see those decisions that get made on the street translate into, hey, I'm here on a Sunday and I want to know more about Jesus. Don't always see that. I don't know why that is. Maybe those people that make all those decisions go, yes, Pastor Nick, wow, you've saved, I feel I've made a decision for Jesus, and they go off to their town and enter their church. Maybe they do that. But of all the times I've done street mission, and I've done them quite a few times with different churches over the years, that pickup from, okay, they've made a decision, we've prayed together, and then seeing them again seems really low. And now, the difference with relational evangelism is you build the relationship enough first that that's in place and intact, whether they say yes to Jesus or not. Because you just want to be friends with them. And that's the difference. And then there's much more of a likelihood that that relational bridge will survive into the journey of discipleship. I want to share a little bit with you about Isaiah 61 movement. It's something that this church partners with. It's a charity which was formed around the idea that many of us struggle to do what Andrew and Philip and the woman at the well did. It helps us to tell others about our faith in Jesus. And it does it in kind of 3 steps, which we'll come on to in just a moment. Basically, I think it's worth saying a little bit of the history of the Isaiah 61 movement for you. As many of you know, there was a man called John Kirkby who formed a charity called Christians Against Poverty in 1996, I think it was. And he went on to establish Christians Against Poverty as a major social action ministry throughout the UK. I mean, the numbers of the impact that he's had is just phenomenal. Thousands of families brought out of debt. I think 500 million being written off in terms of debts, in terms of sorting out debts for people. Just an amazing, amazing ministry and an amazing man. He felt led to do that because a few years prior to that, he was a debt collector in the streets of Bradford, an unsaved and an angry man. And he was going around collecting rent. And one day he knocked on the door of this house, and this guy that he was collecting rent from was kind to him and said, "Are you all right?" And he said, and John replied, "Well, listen, it's 9:30 on a Thursday night, or whatever it was. It's raining, and I'm here to collect your rent. So should we just get this done?" And he was kind of rude to the guy. But over the months that followed, as he went round each month after the rent and collecting the rent, this guy built a relationship with him enough to invite him in for a cup of tea. And then John was like, actually, this guy's kind of quite kind, and he started to look forward to these times when they would have a cup of tea together. And then one day, this guy who was paying the rent to John plucked up his courage and he said the immortal words, "Would you like to come to church with me?" And John Kirkby said yes. And the rest is history. Don't you think that's awesome? I just think that's awesome that somebody would have the courage to do that, and that would lead to such an incredible, incredible fruit from that man's life, because somebody had the courage to say, "Would you come to church with me?" Because that takes guts to say that, doesn't it, church? It's hard to do that. It's really hard to do that sometimes. But if we don't do that, we are going to become an Oxbow Lake. We're going to become irrelevant. We're all going to get old together. And we'll all just move on to glory. And Banbury can go to hell. And I say those words deliberately because that's what we're saying when we say we're not going to reach out to people. That's what we're saying. Well, I'm fine. I'm going to be with the Father in heaven, but I don't really care about you. John got to the end of his ministry with Christians Against Poverty, and he'd done 30 years there, and he'd done really, really well, and he was really kind of sent off in a great way. This is about 5 years ago now, and they gave him a present, and he was kind of leaving, and on his way home, within a few days, he was praying, and he felt the Lord say to him, "So, well done. Who have you led to the Lord recently?" And he was like, "Oh, ouch. I haven't. I've done it through other people, but I haven't done it myself." And the Lord gave him Isaiah 61:1 as a verse. And he said, "I want you to run with this verse and make it happen for UK churches. Change the UK church culture to be more invitational, more Jesus sharing than it is now, because we've fallen into anemia. We have fallen into comfort. Change it, John, change it." And he went, "Oh, okay. But no better man than him. Pioneer something from nothing and make it happen. Change culture. Come on." So he's gone ahead and done that. And last year I joined the team. I joined his team. We did Isaiah 61 movement in Birmingham City Church, and we had something like 500 app installs and 700 acts set. And I'll come on to that in just a bit. But people ran with it, and they invited their friends, and it spiked our growth in the church. And John was so impressed by how BCC in Birmingham responded to Isaiah 61 movement, he invited me to come on board with him in the team. So that's my other job. So I do this job, pastoring 2.5 days a week, and I do Isaiah 61 movement for 2 days a week. And my meeting with David earlier this week was in my Isaiah 61 movement role, but there's a lovely crossover because I can bring some stories from that to here. Isaiah 61 movement is a charity that aims to provide a framework to help us turn good intentions into action. I'd be very surprised if anyone sitting here today had anything other than good intentions towards unsaved people. It's just unthinkable. We would really want for other people to enjoy what we have with Jesus, right? We would want that. But the hard bit is, how do we make that happen practically and in reality? That's what's difficult. It's not the intention, it's turning that into actionable steps. So Isaiah 61 movement helps us to do that. It gives us a framework, and I'll come on to that framework in just a moment. The idea is that all of us take responsibility for outreach in our world. Now, what happens in many churches is there's a model where there's an evangelist or a team of evangelists who pick up this mandate and they run with it and they go and do the outreach on behalf of the rest of the church. And it kind of works. There is some traction with that. Isaiah 61 movement says, no, don't worry about the evangelists and what they're doing. There's another 80% of people over here who could just lift their game a little bit. We would have fantastic outreach potential going on in all of our churches around the UK. So if all of us did a tiny bit more and just upped our game a little bit, we would all do so much better. The analogy we sometimes bring on the team in Isaiah 61 movement meetings with pastors is an analogy from running. So bear with me, I'll explain this analogy before we get into some practical action. The analogy from running is, hands up here, anyone who saw the London Marathon, who watched bits of the London Marathon this year. Did you pop your hand if you saw it on the TV? Or it's kind of not the race to watch all the way through, but it's great at the end, isn't it, to see who wins, all right? We'll have it on in the background. But this year, a man from Kenya called Sebastian Saw, S-A-W-E, ran a sub 2 hour London Marathon for the first time. And he was followed by a colleague who also ran a sub 2 hour marathon. Pretty gutting for him, huh? Because, he was doing a fine race himself. But the two of them crossed the line in under 2 hours. And that's never been done before in a standard marathon. There was a guy that did it in special conditions before, but it wasn't a marathon. Major landmark. We all look at that and go, wow, that's incredible. What a fantastic achievement. Our churches tend to look at evangelism a bit like that. They go, there's a person in the church or a little team in the church that they do evangelism incredibly well. They're just standing at the fish counter in Morrison's and 3 people get saved. And you're like, how did you do that? They just got talent galore pouring out of their body. They just know how to do evangelism. And we stand back and we go, oh man, you are so good at that. Just go ahead, right ahead and do it. I'm not so good. I don't know what to do. So churches have a model, I think a lot of them do, of there's a great person who does evangelism for us, but we'll just let them get on with it. We won't worry about it. Let me just change that paradigm a minute on you and say, how about the rest of the church did park run? If evangelistic actions were miles run, you need Sebastian Saw to set the inspiration, to set the goal, for everybody to go wow, to everybody to desire the lightest trainers ever made by Adidas that he wore, apparently, floating on air. I mean, the guy ran 4 minutes, 13 seconds per mile for 26.2 miles straight. I mean, that is insanely fast. And his second half was quicker than his first half. I mean, the guy is an inspiration. We all need that kind of evangelist on our team, don't we? Somebody who really inspires us and gets us really, really excited about reaching out for Jesus. But if 50 people over here who are not quite so good at evangelism got off their backsides and went and did a park run once a week, suddenly you've got 180 miles of evangelistic actions being run alongside your Sebastian Saw, who can do his 26.2 in superstellar fashion. Do you get the analogy here? If more of us did a little bit, then the superstars can carry on doing their thing, that's fine. But why don't we all just lift our game? So here's the framework that helps our churches to continue to reach people and not become oxbow lakes. It's share life, share faith, and share Jesus. Share life, share faith, and share Jesus. How do we share life? Well, we get alongside people. We share life with them. We take their bin out for them. We get to know their name. We say hi in the street. We're friendly in the supermarket. We don't just ignore the other mums at the school gate or the other dads at the school gate. We're kind, we're friendly, we're normal, we're ordinary. We say hello to people, we smile. We connect relationally. And we share life. We don't just operate in our narrow silo. Sharing faith is now taking our faith that we have on a Sunday and weaving it into every day and including it in our everyday such that people know that we have a faith. Like, how can people get to know Jesus if they don't even know us? I mean, we've got to start that relational journey somewhere, haven't we? But then let's start to weave our faith into our everyday so that people know that we have a faith. You can say things like, hey, at church on Sunday we did whatever it was, and you can share that. You can build your faith as a means of explaining how you have strength in different seasons. I know that at different points in my life, people have said, how have you got through this season? And I've said, there's no way I'd have got through it without Jesus at my side. Back in 2008, I came out of Bible college and I had a bit of debt, and I managed to get a job with an IT contracting company down in London. Not far from that gherkin building, you know, the one in central London that looks like a gherkin, right? So I was working in Fenchurch Street, it's the insurance district, as an IT contractor, earning the most ridiculous amount of money per day I've ever earned in my life. I was very grateful for it, but I knew I was going into church life. And I was waiting for the church that I was assigned to do my MIT to give me a job opportunity. So between about May and August 2008, I worked in central London on this fabulous contractor rate. But all the people on that floor in that building in Fenchurch Street knew that I was a Christian. And they knew that I was going to Bible college. And some of them were absolutely staggered that at the end of August, or whenever it was that I switched across to being a church, they were like, so what's the salary you're going to be on now? And I went, oh, it's this. And they were like, wow, that's not very much. And I said, yeah, it's because I'm called to follow Jesus. I want to go and serve the Lord and be a pastor. And I kid you not, when I left that floor on that day, I had a round of applause from all my IT buddies because they could not believe somebody would do something like that. That's sharing faith. That's letting people see your faith. Let people see your faith. And then, of course, there comes a time when it's time to share Jesus. It's time to tell people the reason for the hope that you have, as it says in one of Peter's letters. Share who Jesus is. Now that takes some timing, and it takes some courage, and it takes some relational building and some faith conversations, but you can do that. Let me give you some practical ways to share life, share faith, share Jesus. For share life, why don't we all intentionally move in some unsaved circles a bit more? What I mean by that is so many of us only know Christians now. That's not going to work anymore. That's just another version of the Windrush Church scenario. How can we move in some new circles so that we can make some new friends? How can we do that? Literally, how can we do that? How can we find a group of people that we don't yet know and get alongside them sufficient for relationships to build where we can start to have an influence? So many of us move in an entirely Christian circle socially. Move in some new circles. Maybe try a night class. Go and do a new activity. Set something up that brings you directly into contact with people who have no knowledge of Jesus, don't know a single Bible story. I met somebody the other day who had never heard about Noah and the Ark. We have the water table of Christianity in our culture has really dropped. Now that's disappointing, but it also creates fantastic opportunity. It's both a disappointment and a fabulous opportunity at the same time. Move in some new circles. In terms of sharing faith, I've got a top tip for you in terms of sharing faith. I've been a Christian now since the year 2000, and I think I've shared and talked about my faith an awful lot. I've only ever had 2 people say no to this way of sharing your faith, which is, can I pray for you about that? Of all the times I've offered prayer for people over the years, only two times has that been rejected. It is a fabulous way to bring faith to a situation, particularly if somebody is experiencing a difficulty. Hey, do you mind if I pray about that? Do you mind if my church group prays about that? We would love to pray about that for you in our church service. Our life group would love to pray for you about that. The hit rate on receptivity to that is colossal. Very, very minimal rejection. Most people actually do pray underneath. They just don't know what it is. They cry out to God for stuff. You're just helping them a little bit. So move in some new circles. Weave your faith into how you do your day-to-day, and offering prayer is a really, really great one to do that. And then I think when it comes to sharing Jesus, I think prayer, timing, and the bold ask is what you need. So I think you need to be praying for some people. Pray for some people by name. Judge the timing carefully. Don't do it too early or too late. But when it's time, make a bold ask. Think of that guy who invited John Kirkby to church. There was a period of time, they had tea together, they talked a bit, and then he went for it and he said, hey, would you come to church with me? Timing was everything. In your YouVersion notes, I've put a link to the app for Isaiah 61 movement. And what the app does is it allows you to, or helps you to set acts in the share life, share faith, share Jesus categories. So please do install the app if you haven't already got it. One piece of feedback I had about the app a while back was it's a bit like a diary. And my response to that is, well, yes, it is. It is a diary. It's a diary where you can put actions that you're going to follow through on and actually do. I'm very happy if you want to use a diary instead. Go for it. That's fine. But in my experience, people aren't using their diaries to set acts to go and meet with people and build relationship. So why don't you use the app? Because we'll all be on it together. You can find Banbury Community Church there. I'm going to ask the worship team just to return. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, worship team. So our mission statement, love God, reach people, make disciples. And we find ourselves today on reach people. How can we reach people? We reach people by being intentional about the circles we're moving in. We don't just go into a Christian bubble. We share our faith with people. We let our faith be evident. We let people see that we have a faith. And then we make a bold ask at the right time. There are some, just as we close, I just want to share 3 things that unsaved people are thinking as they observe our lives. 3 things. So this is a typical unsaved. Let's imagine you're in a workplace. You've gone on the record about your faith. An unsaved person is likely to be thinking these three things. Hopefully, they're thinking, I can see that your faith means a lot to you. Is our faith such that it could be that kind of visibility to someone else? Secondly, I can see that your life works. An unsaved person's looking across and going, well, your life actually works. It really does. It's got strength. You're cheerful. You're present. You're here. Your family is fine. I can see your life works. And then the third thing is I can see that I mean a lot to you. You see, if those three conditions are in place, you've got someone really ripe to lead to the Lord. This person's saying, I can see your faith means a lot to you. I can see your life works. I can see that I mean a lot to you. When those conditions are there, fantastic. That person's ready to go on a journey. Amen? She will stand and we're going to sing.